As the 1920s faded away, change was in the air across Texas. The Lone Star State voted for Herbert Hoover in the national election of 1928. This was the first Republican to win in a statewide race since Reconstruction. The new president's first year started well enough. Then, on October 29, 1929, the United States stock market crashed, plunging the nation into an economic crisis. This latest financial panic seemed remote for most Texans. If wealthy Easterners were suffering, why did that matter to Texans? Why did that matter to Lone Star farmers, ranchers, and roughnecks? The cotton crop had been sold, and the money was in the bank. Livestock had moved from pens to the slaughterhouse. Oil derricks kept climbing skyward. To Texans, this 1929 financial crisis looked more like an Eastern phenomenon. Besides, the government had reorganized the economy over the last 2 decades, right? The Federal Reserve would surely save the day. Average Texans did not worry much. People very rarely understand when they are in the middle of a great and momentous event while it is occurring. Texans simply shrugged it off. The financial collapse devastated people whose life savings were in stocks, but that did not include most Texans. No, stockholders were in places like New York, Boston, and Philadelphia, places remote to people in the Lone Star State. Yankee greed and a lack of prudence had brought them low, Texans figured. So, the 1930s rolled in with little fuss across the Lone Star State. The cotton came up in the springtime, new calves dotted the pastures, and oil poured out of nearly every corner of Texas. As a result, most Texans figured that they must be somehow economically immune to what was scourging the major financial markets. The Depression, as newsmen started calling it, was something happening to the rest of the country and not Texas. This state was exceptional. Towards the end of 1932, the economic problems lapped across the Texas borders. Yet, for average folks, it remained difficult to tell how their lives were any different. Poverty was common in the state. Sharecroppers remained more than half of all farmers, so they lived on little already. As the news worsened, though, Texans wondered if the downturn they were starting to feel was the same old poverty, or if this kind of poor was something new. The answer came quickly. That year, the economic tidal wave finally crashed over Texas. Banks began failing, just like in the rest of the nation. Farmers quickly realized that, in fact, this was not the same old poverty. They watched as the prices for their commodities dropped, and the markets dried up. They could not sell their crops or their cattle because the buyers simply weren't there. Deflation, the decline in prices, wages, and the resulting contraction of the national economy started to ripple across Texas, bringing tough times to nearly every doorstep. Governor Ross Sterling, a successful oil man, looked for a way to help, but it eluded him. The weather hurt too. Texas was already in a dry spell, and much of the rangeland in West Texas had been plowed for cotton. The winds blew hard in that region and carried away great swaths of topsoil. More than a dozen dust storms darkened Texas skies in 1932, and 3 times as many hit the following year. Over time, they increased in number and intensity. Amarillo would soon suffer total blackout conditions repeatedly, and in 1 year suffered the equivalent of 37 days of massive dust storms. These included a famous black blizzard, an 8,000-foot solid wall of blowing dirt driven by an onrushing cold front. The Panhandle had joined an unfortunate club. It became part of the devastated Great Plains the government referred to as the Dust Bowl. All of Texas slipped into the grip of the Great Depression.